Yes, let us know where you're coming from in the comments, where you are. Are you back at school yet? I think some of our Canadian friends might not be back to school, but I think everyone else should be back to school.
Yeah. Their schedule seems to be a bit different from talking about the ones who attended the last conference. They were saying they go later sometimes than anybody else. So, all right. Well, my name is Ashley, and I'm here with the lovely Dr. Deanna Smith, and we are both really excited to go live tonight as the face of TYHO this evening and chat with you a little bit about who we are, what we do at TYHO, what we're excited about coming up for events, and also hopefully we'll have some people join us live and can comment and let us know how your school year is going. I was just sharing that I had already seen a friend that was, we're only a couple weeks into the school year and she's already feeling frustrated with some things going on in her school for her job. And so, sort of like a temp check. How are you doing? What's going well? And what are some ways we can support you? So yeah. Do you want to go ahead first and introduce yourself and fill us in?
So, hey, everybody. My name is Dr. Deanna Smith, and I help schools and teachers primarily focus on creating classroom environments and academic environments that are rooted in joy and inclusion and equity, and also work with Teach Your Heart Out, of course. And so I basically, go around the country and outside the country too, a little bit, just coaching teachers who really want their classrooms to be joyful and inclusive and equitable. And I thought it'd be fun to kind of chat with Ashley, talk about some cool stuff that we have going on at TYHO, do a little temp check, as she mentioned, and just kind of get back into the swing of things with live during back to school season.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for agreeing to jump on here with me. I know it's been a little while for both of us getting on these live. We're like, we're just going to do this and we're going to figure it out. So awesome. Well, so my name's Ashley DiMercurio, and I have my own online teaching business called Your Reading Tutor. And I also dabble in a lot of other educational, entrepreneurial opportunities. And so specifically, I started working with Teach Your Heart Out this year and am now working as the conference director. And I'm just loving getting to know everyone at Teach Your Heart Out and meeting all the amazing educators. So it's been really fun to sort of like get back to some in-person work after working online for so long. And it's interesting that that's happening for me with TYHO. And then also I'm doing some teaching again in person for the homeschool co-op. So trying lots of new things this year. All the things. Yeah. Jumping in. Awesome. So it looks like we have a couple people joining us live, which is fantastic. So thank you so much for jumping on. And we would love to hear from you. If you want to say hi in the comments, let us know where you're watching from, what grade you teach, or what kind of educational position you have. That's one thing that I've been thinking about a lot in education. And as the year has started, like how teachers, I think, when I first started teaching, I was in a traditional public school setting, classroom setting. And I really thought that was like the only way to be a teacher. And that if I wasn't teaching in the traditional public school classroom, then I wasn't really a teacher. And since leaving the classroom and learning about all the other ways you can be a teacher and all the other ways you can be involved with education, and like I can still be passionate about helping education and helping our children and not necessarily be in the classroom. So it's been really cool to meet a lot of, just different people and see the way they're impacting education in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel totally the same. I mean, I think, well, the first thing I did was go to admin, which I always tell people is kind of a trap because most of us get into teaching because we love the kids. And then when you become an administrator, you rarely get to deal with the kids, or you get to deal with the kids that are struggling the most. And it's really, you're just working with the adults. So that was my first kind of step out of the classroom. And I think that, I love people who feel like they are administrators. I love that for them, but it was definitely not my calling. I think I prefer to work with education, like more closely with the kids, or just more directly with teachers in like a less formal capacity. But there's so many different ways that folks can bring gifts. And I feel like now a lot of teachers are also really leaning into the fact that you can be a teacher and like you can be a teacher and have, a creative
Mhm.
pursuit or an Etsy store or, just other things going on too, which I think is really important because teaching is
Yeah.
so all consuming. So
Right.
figuring out how to be a teacher in a way that really works for you and that like resonates with your spirit, I just think that's huge.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that will help people avoid like I know, well, for me, when I first left the classroom, I felt really like sad and depressed and like, who am I, if I'm not a classroom teacher, because I had wrapped up my whole life in that identity and was really like narrow focused, I think, at first. And so it has definitely helped me to understand that like teaching can be your passion and it be who you are, but it doesn't have to be all of you. You can have a lot of
Exactly.
other.
Yeah.
And I think that probably, more teachers are doing that now, I feel like, than when I first went into teaching. I think at least it seems that way, that a lot of teachers have other activities, other pursuits, and they're, you know, having a better balance of, work and life outside of teaching.
Yeah, I feel like that is definitely the case. And that's one of the things that I love about Teach Your Heart Out is we, really do speak to like teachers as a whole person and, you're not
Mm.
sure you have all these other things going on and we try to like pour into people, in their full selves, whatever they got going on, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I know for, future events and coming conferences, we've talked a lot about, mental health. And I think that is the greatest thing about our cruise that we take, PD at Sea, because it has that conference built in, but then it like forces you go to the conference, but you also have the whole day of relaxation and self-care and really networking and collaborating with other educators.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's good for teachers. I mean, I'm a big fan of meeting people outside of your school too. I
Hmm.
think it's so interesting because I think teaching can be really like isolating in a way because
Yeah.
really you're in your school and you're kind of in your context. And because you're the only adult really in the room, it can feel just very narrow. And this is
Hmm.
something that I experience a lot of times when I coach
Right.
teachers is they'll be like, oh my gosh, my I'm having such a hard time. My kids are so crazy. They're so difficult. And then I'm like, honestly, in comparison to what you see outside of like this context, you're doing a great job. So I think it is just really helpful to like broaden your horizons of like, this is what teaching can look like. Oh, this is how this school does it. This is how like this district does it. Cause there's so many ways to embrace and like be a teacher.
Hmm.
I think that's another thing that I like about, well, I feel like social media does some of that because we can interact with
Yeah.
teachers from everywhere. And I learn something new from teachers every day. So I think that's really cool about like just broadening your teacher network and your horizons.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about just like the back to school time. And I would love to hear from you and your perspective. Just, what can teachers do to sort of maintain the positivity and the joy? And, because I think sometimes the beginning of the year is very exciting, right? You're meeting new kids and there's like the teacher outfits. I love all the Instagram reels that everyone's
Yeah.
making. You're getting your school supplies and there's a lot of like excitement and then you maybe, I don't know, you've been in school for 4 weeks. Now you have to plan back to school night and you're starting to see like, who are those kiddos that are going to need a little bit more intense attention
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
year, and I think it sometimes when you're thinking ahead, like if you are struggling with like a certain family or a certain student or a certain part of your position, your administration, whatever it is, all of a sudden the back to school energy drops off and then
Right.
you're like, I still have the rest of the year ahead of me.
Yeah.
So what do you
I
think
feel
are
like, go ahead.
some strategies and some tools and some ideas that you would offer those teachers?
Yeah, I feel like there's such a rush, like a
Mhm.
fun rush of back to school, like all the supplies and getting everything ready. And it's just like this bubbling moment of anticipation. And then it can definitely die down, and you're kind of like, okay, now what? So I
Mhm.
think navigating that, one thing that I'm encouraging my coachees that I have on my coaching load this year to do a lot is to keep the energy and the community building going because
Mhm.
when thing that I saw a lot was like, you do the community building, you have the fun little activities in the first week, and then it's like, all right, now it's time to work. And I just feel like we need to embrace an understanding of education that the community is being continuously built and reinforced.
Right.
And it's not separate from academics. It's part of the academic experience. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
that people feel like, oh, I need to spend time like doing, like the instruction, so I can't build community. And it's like, no, those two things should work in concert with each other. So I think
Mm-hmm.
finding ways to keep that beginning of the year community building and energy rolling will help you kind of nip in the bud some of those big challenges that you'll start to see with your students. And that's just on the behavior side. On the academic side, I think too, just at the beginning of the year, kids have, they're really building up their stamina. They're really still getting out of summer mode. So you could
Yeah.
have kids that so that's one that will probably get better. At the beginning of the
Right.
year, you might only be able to do 2 minutes of direct instruction at a time, but you can
Mm-hmm.
slowly build up. You might be able to do sustained silent reading for like 30 seconds, and then you could slowly build up, right? So I think that's
Right.
something that you could look forward to, is know that their academic stamina and capacity will increase. So that's something that can kind of be a positive as you keep going throughout the year. And then I would say, like, just making sure that you keep those good routines and you keep those positive habits going, because it's so easy to kind of fall off.
Yeah.
And and know, like, when the honeymoon phase is over, as they say with your class, like,
Right.
mean that you're a bad teacher. It doesn't mean that you have a bad class.
Mm-hmm.
It just means that everybody is still like settling in and getting to know each other. And
Right.
it's natural for kids to try to like test boundaries and figure out like, okay, how is this, how does it fit into the classroom? So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like those are some of the things I would say. What would you say?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think those are great tips. And I really like that what you said about the stamina. Like stamina will increase their learning stamina, their ability to focus. And I think even as a parent, I can speak to that. Like that's true when you're parenting too. You're like, oh gosh, like they can only do one thing without, before I have to say it 10 times or whatever. I think it helps me as both a teacher and a parent to say, like, this is temporary. They're going to get better at this. Like, this is my job, is to teach them how to get better at this. And I would probably write that on a card. I think like this, the stamina will increase. Hang in there.
They're going to get better.
Yeah. I always felt like back to school night with families was exhausting for sure. It could go like they, having to work all day and then prep all of that and then be at the school. But I did start to get a better perspective after I had my first son, because I was like, well, once you become a parent, I feel like you start to understand like just how important that parent teacher communication piece really I don't know, just that perspective for me. It really helped me to invest more in parent teacher night and just feel like, okay, this is one part of my job. Like this is one day, it's not like I'm staying this late every night. And that this is really important because I can make those connections with the families on a personal level, right. In that moment. So
yeah, back to school. I mean, it's huge. I think one thing that I thought was really interesting that a school district that I saw is doing is they do full scale conferences. And I thought that was an interesting idea. Instead of just back to school night, they have like pre-year conferences. But if you are doing a back to school night, some of the things that I would highlight for sure is, number one, you want to make sure that these families know you, because again, with a lot of families, it comes down to not getting the benefit of the doubt, assumptions, miscommunications when you have those challenges. And I hope that you don't, but you might, let's be real. And so I would say making sure that they really know you and they understand how genuine you are and that you're on team, whatever the student is, that
right.
piece is huge. So whatever you can do to communicate that, getting your ducks in a row, like if you're going to have an expectation that like you need to check the home folder, or you need to check the class dojo, or you need to check the whatever, facilitate that at the beginning and give families really clear expectations. Because I mean, for me, I hate when it's like half the way through the year and then it's like, oh, all of a sudden I'm supposed to be doing this thing. I'm like, what am I gonna, tell me a back to school night so I can like set it up and get prepared. So I would say really be intentional. and back to
Yeah.
school. Don't take that opportunity, that captive audience for granted.
Yeah.
And just really, get those lines of communication often. I always had some sort of personal letter saying a little bit about me. And then I would also front load, especially as a teacher that's very focused on culture responsive teaching. I would front load information about that. I would say, like, just so you know, like, I really hope to bring the lens of culture responsive teaching. That means I'm excited to hear about the culture and the practices you guys have at home. And I value
Yeah.
those and I respect those. And I'm excited for us how to learn how to like be people from different cultures together in like a empathetic and encouraging classroom space. So I did a lot of front loading for that because I know that there's going to be some teachers out there, especially in today's political climate, that have families that are going to be mad, that you're maybe talking about culture. Maybe they don't want you to like mention certain people or certain things. So I would just do all that at the beginning so they know, like, hey, you're Miss Room. Like, in my classroom, we talk about culture, we talk about identity, we talk about race, we talk about LGBT issues. There's going to be a read aloud with this, that, and the other. That way, you can kind of have those conversations early so families don't feel surprised. And the kids come home saying, like, oh, yeah, today, so and so was talking about, like, you never want the kids to be the ones giving that information. You want to front it. So I would say that's something to think about, too, intentionally back to school night. But it's such a great opportunity, and just try to have fun with it,
Yeah. That's a really good point and a really great idea. So if you are an educator who has a strong focus or a background, or you're really investing a lot of your professional development into learning about this specific topic, like really letting your families know in advance. That's a really good tip. Awesome. So let's see. We have Cree Burks Moore joining us. Hello. Thank you. And I see your comment about struggling with small group reading. I would love it if you could let us know a little bit more about your classroom and what maybe what age or what grade you are working with, and if there's any other tips that would give us some more information about this. But yeah, I know small group reading can certainly be a challenge especially if you have a really large classroom or like a large class size and you're on your own. You're trying to manage the small group right in front of you. Well, all the other kids, I remember spending an enormous amount of time teaching routines and like expectations for that time, and like really having in the beginning, the actual small group time being pretty short. Like you said, like you might only be able to do a certain amount of time at first, and you have to work up to that, and helping kids to understand what are they doing while you're working with your small group that's right in front of you.
Yeah. It definitely depends on the grade level. Cause I would say, like, when I worked with kindergarten, for example, the person that you meet at the beginning of the year is not the real kindergartner that you're going to be dealing with. There's so much change in those kids from September to June and their capacity. Like, they will blow you away by June. And September, it can feel like, oh my God, I can't do anything with these kids. Right. So just keep that in mind about just their own development. I would say small group instruction is becoming really so necessary just because of the variety of grade levels that are being grouped into one classroom. And so basically, if you aren't differentiating well, you're gonna have a really hard time getting any academic gains in your classroom. So it's really important that you facilitate differentiation. Some tips that I would say when you're trying to do small group reading or just centers of any kind and you have those disruptive students would be, number one, I know it sounds cliche and somebody's going to drag me for saying this, but you have to build relationship with those disruptive students. A lot of the times those behaviors are connection seeking. They're seeking a connection, they want attention, et cetera, for whatever reason. So the baseline is your preventative strategy, which is making sure you have really strong relationships with your heavy hitters. And then remember that you want to train. So I like to do centers on something very low stakes. I don't start my centers with an actual academic task. I start my centers with like something really low stakes, very nonsensical, even if it's something as basic as just like a word search and a couple like little games that they can play. I have them go around and do that so they can get the feel of it without feeling that pressure of like, oh my God, this is a huge academic thing that I really need them to get. No, I'm starting with a silly little read aloud and they're playing a couple games and we rotate. Get the feel of it, lots of praise, lots of reinforcement, and try it over and over and over again. Then another thing I like to do is I like to debrief with my students after the centers, and I'll bring them back to the rug and say like, okay, how did that go? Like, give us some pros and cons, some, strengths and weaknesses for how we just did. And they know, like they know when they're not meeting your expectations. And so
Yeah.
sometimes that reflective moment is helpful.
Right.
And then I would also say, if you really have a student, I always forget if it goes like tier 1 is the most challenging or tier 3 is most challenging. But if you have like a
Yeah.
tier 3 student who like has those really big behaviors, really challenging, sometimes giving them something to do. Maybe they're not rotating with everybody. Maybe they're the teacher assistant and they stay at the kidney table with the teacher and they're getting that skill reinforcement maybe multiple times, but you need to get them closer than sending them out just yet. And that could be like an area of growth for them to be able to rotate. But sometimes they need a job, they need to feel important, they need your attention, and you can kind of bank some of that with them and then kind of send them off. So those are just a couple of things off the top of my head that I would say if you're thinking about figuring out small group reading instruction. Because I mean, we can't get rid of small group reading instruction. I feel like a lot of teachers, a lot of teachers that I coach, they're like, well, maybe I just won't, do the differentiation. I'm like, nah, you got to keep that. You have to figure out the classroom management piece because you will not be able to be successful until we crack that. So I'm sure, keep at it. It's challenging, but you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would definitely say look for someone in your school, or maybe it's someone you follow online. Look for someone who's doing it well and reach out to them and say, I'm really struggling with this, and I can see from your classroom, or I can see from this video you shared that you've really got this down. Like, would you be willing to chat with me a little bit about, what I'm struggling with and how they could help you or what you could learn from them? I think a lot of times we try to like just carry it on our own and feel like it's a failure if you're saying like, oh, I can't do it, or it's not going well, or you should be able to figure it out on your own. But I just really think the best learning comes from collaborating, and the teacher that you go to is going to feel so, it's going to fill their cup for you to come to them and say like, wow, like looks like you've really got this down, So how can we support each other? So, and I'm sure there's something you're doing really well and really amazing that you can share with the teacher in the future.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, hopefully she'll come back maybe and tell us a little bit more about what's going on. I have a couple other questions that were messaged since we last spoke. Yeah. And you kind of started a little bit talking about one, but what are some strategies for building strong relationships with students who have diverse backgrounds? And I thought that was a perfect one for this conversation because we sort of are already touching on that, how important, it is to really build the relationships with all students, not just the ones that it's like easy to connect with.
Right.
So,
yeah. And I think it's so, and I want to say too, it's a continuum. And so a lot of times, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, we'll do the relationship building really intentionally at first, and then it kind of tapers off. But I would say, again, it's an ongoing thing. And the reason why I think the whole building relationships conversation can sometimes get a lot of heat. Like when I talk about this, sometimes folks will be like, it's easy for you to say as an administrator, or like, it's really tough. It's not part of my job. My job is to just teach the content. I actually last week had a coachee say like, well, I teach math. Like, I'm just going to teach the content. And so we had to like kind of break it down and say like, you actually teach children, not just the content. But and so things like that, it's really important to recognize that even though it might not seem like it is your job, it makes your job so much easier. And the mindset shift is the time that you spend engaging in relationship building, you will get that time back instructionally because you'll be able to actually get through a lesson. You'll be able to get through the material because who hasn't been there when you're looking at the clock and you've got 7 minutes and 22 minutes left of content, right? Yeah. So it's really important to recognize that it does pay off in the long run. I would say concrete strategies looks like, the 2x10 method is one that's like you have a 2-minute non-academic conversation with the student for every day for 10 days. And I really encourage you to embrace non-academic conversations. This is something that I really had to learn more about because initially I was very hesitant to talk about the games, to talk about like other things that I felt like weren't academic with my students because I didn't want to validate. Like they would be like, yeah, miss, I was up till like midnight playing the game. And I'm like, I don't want to talk to you about this. Like go to bed. You know what I mean? Like, so I would be kind of weirded out by talking about them with that. But I feel like that is their gateway. Like it's just kind of meeting them where they're at. So
Yeah.
non-academic conversations with your student regularly, if you can. Sometimes it's just about being visible. That, be in the car line, go to the soccer match, go to the quince,
Mm.
go walk through, even if you don't want to have lunch with kids, because I know for my introverted gang out there, this isn't me, but I know introverts, y'all like to close y'all doors and go in the classroom. But walk through the lunch area, all of those things, just being visible
Yeah.
is huge for kids. And so you don't need to overthink it.
Yeah.
Just think about like small talk, being visible, and
Hmm.
when
Hmm.
kids throw you those little bits for connection, sometimes kids will do something or say something and it'll be out of left field or like super random. But honestly, what it is it's just like a little breadcrumb that they're trying to give you to like connect with me, say something, look at me, do
Right.
something.
Right. Right.
Make sure you respond and you respond to those and you're active, because it can be really demoralizing for our students. They don't have a
Hmm.
lot of time other than lunch to really talk about what they want to talk about or be themselves.
Right.
I would say just like recognize those moments and tap in with them as much as you can, and keep
Yeah.
notes. Like if you
Yeah.
students that you talk to, like I talked to so and so, so and so, so and so today, or put a little plus sign on your roster, and then go back at the end of the week and say, okay, who haven't I talked to? Get them
Yep.
on Monday or Tuesday, right? You can get
Yeah.
really organized with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for my like online tutoring students, I keep notes on, digital little spreadsheet, and I have a little corner that says like really likes Fortnite or really likes, football or whatever. And even if it's something that I'm not particularly interested in, I try to like learn something about it so that the next time I see them, I can come back and say, hey, like, did you hear about this that happened? Or like, I've also had a lot of luck with finding like a specific, like if I see an article or even sometimes just specifically looking for it, like if a student is really interested in a certain sports team, like seeking out a news, did they win the game? Did they not win the game? So that I can go in and say, oh my gosh, Sarah, I saw your team won this weekend, even if I didn't even watch the game, like just making that connection and gives them, helps them to feel like, I don't know, that phrase, if you say, I was thinking of you, or I saw this and thought of you, I feel
Mhm.
like is so powerful for our students.
Yeah, they love to feel thought of. And I think it connects to what I always like to remind teachers is that the amount of time, the amount of like disposable time or free time that families have is shrinking
Yeah.
and shrinking
Yeah.
because of the economy, because people having 3, 4 jobs, commuting, all the things.
Yeah.
And so they might not have an adult that actually has a connected, interested conversation with them, every day. You might be the only
Yeah.
person that's interested and has capacity to talk to them. So I
Right.
feel like that's another thing we can't forget is like you might be really the only person that cares to hear what they have to say on a daily basis. So that can be
Yeah.
so validating for our kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking to a mom over the weekend who's saying basically what you're saying. She was like, once the kids get home and then they have after school activities and then it's like dinner and bed and showers and like or showers in bed. It's like,
Right.
there's not a lot of like downtime for
Right.
connection during the week. So that's super important. All right. It's already 8:30. That went so fast.
Nice when you're
So
having
fun talking to you. Yeah. So our plan here is to hop on live on a more regular basis. I'm going to say we're going to shoot for once a month, hopefully twice a month, and get a schedule out for you guys. But we would love to hear from our audience and our Teach Your Heart Out educators if there's a topic that you would like us to cover and discuss, if there's a guest that you would love to come on and we can ask questions. We would love to hear that. And of course, before we go for the night, we have to share a little bit more about PD at Sea that's coming up next summer, 2025. I'm going to go ahead and share the link in the comments right now if people want to check that out. But I know I went on my first TYHO cruise last summer, and I really didn't know what to expect because I'd never been on any kind of cruise before, let alone a TYHO event. And it really was amazing. It was so amazing to be traveling and seeing new things and meeting new people and just learning all about their journey as educators, really getting to connect with the speakers at the event. So I'm excited. It's hard to think about something so far away, but because I get to see all the behind the scenes and the planning of it keeps me really plugged in. But Yeah, so I think next summer we are going to the Bahamas, right?
We
That's
are, yes. And what's
uh,
super cool about the Bahamas too, y'all, is we're doing a service project. So we're actually going to go to a school for a day and like interact with folks. So I feel like if you're a teacher, you obviously have, a heart of service. And so that'll be a really cool opportunity. And then you're also on a cruise and you're getting your PD hours. I know every state has different requirements. So it's really a great, like all in one type of experience. And it's truly it's a vibe. It's truly a different vibe, but it's really fun. So I hope to see a lot of you guys there. We have some people that have been on every single TYHO cruise. Like we have people that come back year after year because it's just like such a fun thing to be like, I'm doing PD and I'm at sea, like I'm on a cruise.
Yeah. So it's definitely a one of a kind event. And we also have a day right before we leave for the cruise in Orlando where we're going to have some stuff going on. So if you're watching and you're in Florida in the Orlando area and you can't do the cruise, but you want to get some of that TYHO energy, definitely, reach out to us if you need more information. But we will have an option for in person in Orlando before the cruise. And then also that is part of the cruise if you register for that event.
Yeah. So it's going to be pretty epic. The boat looks amazing. I'm very excited. And I just can't wait to connect with some of y'all. But like Ashley said, like, don't be a stranger. We are so about building a community. So if you have questions, like, let us know. What are you experiencing? What would you like us to talk about? We have like our presenter team. We have people with doctorates, national teachers of the year, like very people who have a lot of experience. And so if you're having a challenge, like there's somebody on our team that we can bring onto the live and talk about it for sure. Because we also we're ending this whole era of like struggling in silence. Like we're calling on each other, community, and helping each other out. So that's really what we're here for. To make it, to make it fun and to hopefully keep you in the classroom happier, longer, and more joyfully.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's a big theme for us this year is that TYHO and PD at Sea is so much more than a conference. We really are building a community. You can find us here on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. We have a Facebook group called Teacher Heart Out Nation. So if you're not in that group, make sure you join us there. And there's lots and lots of educators in there already. I'm sure that would love to support you and help answer your questions. So yeah, don't be a stranger. And you can find me at hello@teacherheartout.com. If you have a question, you can email me. All right, everyone. Thank you so much, Deanna, for jumping on with me tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And hopefully I'll connect with some of y'all over on Instagram. Just add Deanna Smith at my name. Send me a DM and let me know, where you're coming from, what you teach. And I will see you on a cruise.
Yes. Can't wait. All right, everyone. Have a great night.